What if the very foundation of everything you've ever believed was built on a silence too loud to ignore? What if the most vocal opponents of God weren't defending truth, but concealing fear? And what if the one man who swore there is no design, no mind, no divine, had spent his life circling a truth too terrifying to name? Richard Dawkins, the titan of atheistic thought, has crafted an empire of reason, one meticulously built upon the scaffolding of Darwinian evolution, blind mechanisms, and the cold silence of the cosmos. But beneath the elegance of his arguments lies something else, something he rarely addresses, not a flaw in the logic, but an absence too perfect, an order too aligned, a symmetry that haunts the very randomness he champions. Is it possible that Dawkins, in all his brilliance, has not disproved God, but instead danced dangerously close to unveiling him? Listen carefully to his words, and you'll feel it. The tremor behind the certainty, the nervous laughter when mystery enters the room. He speaks of biology as if it were mathematics, but the poetry of life resists the numbers. He insists on chaos, yet the universe keeps whispering coherence. Dawkins calls it delusion, but the real delusion may be thinking that something so deeply intentional could ever be accidental. This is not a critique. This is a confrontation, not of Dawkins the man, but of the fortress he's built to keep wonder at bay. Today, we walk through the cracks in that fortress, not to destroy, but to reveal, to point to what he has refused to see, or perhaps what he has seen and could never unsee. The truth he cannot escape is not out there in the galaxies or fossils. It's in the silence between his words. So stay, watch, and let the tension pull you deeper, because by the time this ends, you may not remember the moment it happened, but something in you will have shifted. The question isn't whether God exists. The question is, why does someone like Dawkins fight so hard to run from him? There is a truth that doesn't knock. It waits, immovable, ancient and invincible, behind every shadow of reason, under every equation that claims to decode the cosmos. Richard Dawkins has built fortresses out of logic, lit fires with words, sharpened by challenge, and marched through the halls of academia like a prophet of absence. However, there is something he cannot silence, not with books, not with biology, not even with time. It breathes between the pauses of his interviews. It echoes in the restless laughter after each denial. It's not a lack of evidence. It's the evidence of the lack. How do you dismantle the divine when even your own breath is borrowed? Dawkins proclaims that faith is a virus, but has he ever questioned the emptiness that echoes when the microscope goes silent? He chases fossils, but fears the fossilized longing engraved in the human soul, that ancient attraction to something beyond neurons, beyond atoms. Why does he speak of randomness with such devotion, but shudder when confronted by the absurd order that lurks in chaos? He says that the universe is implacable, and yet his arguments beg for meaning. What is this if not a prayer disguised as denial? There are cracks in every certainty he has built, cracks that widen in the silence of midnight, when even the atheist becomes a philosopher. Dawkins tried to reduce wonder to neurons, amazement to survival instincts, transcendence to illusion, but wonder refuses to be dissected. It remains in the birth of a child, in the terror of mortality, in the irrational beauty of self-sacrifice. And in these moments, raw, trembling human, even the staunchest skeptic becomes a silent mystic, not by choice, but because of the truth from which he cannot escape. So we ask, not Dawkins, but you. If the universe really is empty, why do we yearn for something more? If God is just a myth, why do his whispers haunt even the minds that deny him? If we're nothing more than cosmic dust, why does this mere thought seem like a betrayal? There's a paradox that Dawkins can't resolve. Why does the absence of God sound so much like suffering? It's not about refuting a man, it's about exposing the wound he refuses to name. Behind the eloquence, behind the intellect, There is a child still searching for a father who swore he never existed. And that, perhaps, is the most human truth of all, the one that no atheist can escape, not even the loudest. He calls it a delusion. But is it not more delusional to believe that love, true, selfless, aching love, is nothing but a chemical accident? That the tears of a mother over her dying child are merely evolutionary strategies, not sacred echoes of something eternal? Dawkins says the universe has no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, only blind, pitiless indifference. And yet, every syllable he utters is a rebellion against that very indifference. His career is a monument not to apathy, but to longing, to the desperate urge to make sense of it all, to force order upon what he claims is chaos. Why? Why does the atheist write so many books against a God he insists isn't there? It is not logic that drives him. It is grief masquerading as logic, a war within the soul, camouflaged in syllogisms. You can hear it in the way his voice hardens when speaking of belief, not like a scientist dismissing myth, but like a son still angry at a father he could never reach. There is pain behind the prose, and fear behind the mockery. The fear of being wrong, the fear of standing before a truth so vast, so unspeakable, that every argument melts into silence. The fear of one question: what if God has always been there, watching him deny him? Look closer and you'll see it, the contradictions bleeding through the pages of his certainty. He deconstructs the Bible, yet cannot construct peace. He defies worship, yet creates disciples. He rejects divine meaning, yet preaches his gospel to the lost. He became the very thing he accused religion of being, a prophet with a pulpit, shaping narratives, feeding ideologies, demanding allegiance. And still, in the quiet moments, his soul, like every soul, hungers for more than molecules. Because, deep down, beyond the debates and defiance, Dawkins is not battling God. He is battling the unbearable possibility that he exists, and that this existence would demand a surrender far deeper than science can offer. To acknowledge God would mean confronting the pride, the wounds, the ghosts he's buried beneath decades of academia. It would mean vulnerability. And nothing terrifies the intellect more than having to kneel. But what if it's not the absence of evidence that keeps him away, but the evidence he cannot unsee? The exquisite precision of the cosmos, the sacred ratios in the petals of a flower, the language of DNA whispering of authorship, the human conscience, stubborn, persistent, unexplainable, and the aching sense in every heart that something is missing, something or someone. Dawkins has spent a lifetime silencing that whisper with noise, but the whisper persists. It always does, because it is not outside of him. It is within you. See, the truth isn't something he failed to discover. It's something he has run from, meticulously, eloquently, fearfully. He builds walls of reason not to see better, but to keep something out. But truth does not need permission to exist. It knocks quietly, then louder, then crashes through when silence no longer protects. And in that moment, no theory can save you. Not Darwin, not logic, not applause. Only one question will remain, echoing in the dark. What if you were wrong? And what if, in the end, the God you spent a lifetime denying was never your enemy, but your answer? What if the intelligence behind the stars is not a tyrant, but a father, not a threat to reason, but its source? And what if all your brilliance, all your defiance, all your elegant rebellion was not wasted but guided? What if the story you've been trying to erase is the very story you were meant to live? You cannot escape what you are made from. And if your mind was forged in the fire of divine thought, then no denial, no book, no fame will ever rewrite your origin. The truth is not out there, Dawkins. It's in you. It always was. And sooner or later, it will speak. How do you unsee what your soul has already witnessed? Not with your eyes, but with that deeper gaze, the one that never blinks, never lies. Throughout this journey, we have not merely confronted the words of a man, we've peeled back the illusions wrapped around them. What Dawkins calls science, you may now begin to see as a fortress built not on truth, but on the fear of it. And behind every fortress, there is a child trembling. You've heard his voice echo in reason, but have you noticed the tremor beneath his certainties? The man who rejects God most violently is often the one most haunted by him. We were never debating logic here. We were listening for the silences. The ones that scream when the camera cuts, when the applause fades, when the brilliant arguments dissolve into the dark quiet of the night. In that silence, Dawkins cannot hide, and neither can we. Because truth, the real truth, is not a conclusion. You reach, it is a voice that keeps calling your name in the stillness, a voice you were taught to ignore but never truly forgot. That voice is not theology, it is not religion, it is not even belief, it is recognition. And tonight, it recognized you. And now, you stand on the edge of something irreversibly human, the fracture between what you were told to believe and what you've begun to feel. The truth Dawkins cannot escape is not a fact, not a formula, not a cosmic equation. It is the unbearable intimacy of being known by something greater than intellect, something ancient, something that doesn't ask to be proven because it was never absent. The void he speaks of is not empty, it is pregnant with presence. A presence that neither atheism nor arrogance can contain. So ask yourself, what if your longing is not delusion, but direction? What if your questions were not errors in your programming, but invitations from eternity? You were not made to orbit the coldness of nihilism. You were made to burn, to ache for transcendence. That ache is not weakness. It is the fingerprint of the divine. And now that it's stirred, you cannot go back to sleep. If something within you was cracked open during this journey, don't rush to seal it. Stay with it. Let it expand. Let it speak. Let it lead you. If this message ignited something in you, something wordless, something wild, do not let it vanish. Share it. Speak of it. Invite others to sit in this discomfort, this wonder, this awakening. Subscribe not just to this channel, but to the truth that refuses to be silenced. Like, comment, be present. Because this conversation, this confrontation, this echo is only just beginning.